want to talk to you real quick about the dark night of the soul. There's a period of transformation that happens where one seems to go through a period of unknowing, a very deep unknowing. And it's a very unsettling kind of phase that one goes through during spiritual transformation. It's a feeling that it requires total commitment to trusting in God's will. Trusting God's will for providence, that the next period of unfoldment is going to go the way that it's supposed to go, even though during that dark night of the soul there isn't really an understanding of what's happening yet. And even the words that are given to help one along, they can be a little helpful, but it really does it almost no justice. Until one goes through it, the understanding is really absent. So, some of you know that the last few years have been pretty trying for me, and that's because of the struggles that I've gone through in the transformation. And it's still unfolding. There is really no end to it, but there's a point where grace kind of drags you out of the cave that you've been hiding in for so long and kind of exposes you to all of the darkness that you've been harboring inside. And the reason is not because judgment is needed, but really it's a matter of seeing it clearly so that it can be released, so that it can be cleared out from your inner experience. And it's not the easiest thing, because the darkness that we're born into in the world, we kind of get attached to it. And we become accustomed to it. We become in a way accepting of it in an unconscious kind of a way, because we're not really aware of it. It just becomes the norm, because that's the way it seems to be for everybody that we seem to encounter. But when that darkness gets rooted out from inside, it's very humbling. It's very painful in many different regards. But the good news is that once it's out forever. It's gone. And so this clearing out process, it's not like a clearing out like I'm learning something new and it replaces something that I thought before I learned that new something. It's not like that. This is a transformation that's happening. And so when and as the transforming occurs, the old exists no longer. It doesn't have room for the old. Now, what does that mean exactly? Because the body and the mind can still be used after the transformation begins its unfolding. after the recognition of reality becomes more apparent. The dark night of the soul is largely misunderstood when it's read, simply because of the lack of reference from experience, not from mental knowing, not from mental knowledge. So I'm putting this information out for you because there aren't very many people that I've come across who could help me during those dark times. Prayer was nice. There were people that prayed for me, and I appreciate that very much. But even though the warmth of love from the hearts that cared for me through that process and are caring for me through the remainder of this process that's unfolding now, even though the warmth of love is felt in that, there's still this kind of healing that doesn't happen immediately after this phase of the dark night of the soul begins. The pain and all of the scars, it's almost like ripping off a scab in order to put some kind of a healing ointment on it that will make it heal better in a way. That's really a rough analogy, but the pain is there during the process. And I can say that I've never felt pain as deep as I felt during the beginning of this dark night of the soul. I'm still recovering from the trauma that's part of the package. You can't have transformation without sacrifice. You can't have transformation taking it for granted simply by saying I believe and then not. The scriptures talk about being a living sacrifice. So you can't have the transformation without the living sacrifice. Something old has to die in order for something new to be born. And that is not in your mind. That would be the easy way out, and that's the way the mind would love to paint it. But unfortunately, that's not how reality is structured. But the good news is that, again, once the light is seen in the darkness, you realize that it's just going to get sweeter and sweeter after that point. Because it's when you see that light in that deepest, darkest place of your existence that the pinnacle of your unfoldment begins. It's like a seed being planted in the ground, and it dies, and there's a struggle during that death. But once the new life form begins to expand from that seed, something totally new that's never been in existence comes into unfoldment. The scriptures talk about the anointing and how the audience in the passage where it says there's an anointing that's been given from above will teach the ones in the passage, and that there are no requirements of man to teach, because the anointing is sufficient. In other words, one has a special kind of insight that comes from beyond the mind, from something purer, something higher. And this insight is what teaches. It's like a connection with truth. And that connection with truth is beyond all knowledge. It's the source from which all knowledge emanates. And not only knowledge, but everything else in existence emanates. So even though there wasn't much information on the internet and in books that I could find that could really help me understand what I was struggling with spiritually, and I don't mean struggling to understand, I mean the struggles, the trials that I was going through, I didn't have much information to look into to help me understand how to deal with that. But the connection with truth and my faith in that has proven itself in my own experience to carry me through that storm, through that darkest part of unfoldment, and into something much lighter, definitely much more in tune with God's love. And also something a little more in tune with the power and the reality of faith. Because until that trying time, there really wasn't an understanding of the depth of power that the structure of faith affords the soul. But until one enters deeply into the spiritual reality and is able to let go of the attachments from the world and the distractions from the world, only then can faith in its truest and purest application begin to be understood from the heart. Because faith is what helps the heart recover. And more than just the human heart, but the spiritual heart. It really helps one recover from it's like a physician pouring a cleansing agent on a wound. This is a good analogy. I like it because it really kind of illustrates the pain that happens in that moment. But what's really happening is that cleansing agent is quickening the healing process. It's getting poured into the wounds that are already in existence, but have been carried, and one has become accustomed to carrying them and used to the pain. So it feels ordinary to be under all of that pain. But that cleansing agent goes deep into that wound and it cleanses it out, and so there's this seriously deep burning, this pain that happens through the process. But once the healing begins after that, then the pain is understood, why it happened. Where is it taking me as far as the sanctification process is concerned? This becomes more clear as one continues in their spiritual evolution. I think it's 2 Peter, or maybe it's 1 Peter. It talks about the fiery trials which are to try you. That isn't just a metaphor for a rough time in the human plane of existence. The depth of the scriptures is largely misunderstood because they're looked at from the wrong pair of eyes. But until one attains that spiritual seeing, that intuitive kind of intelligence that evolves within, then everything in the world is seen only through the mechanism of survival. What is this going to do for me, and how is it going to help me survive? Well, in the spiritual plane, when those fiery trials begin, faith is the only thing that gets you through to the other side. Faith is the only thing where survival has any real meaning. Because it's the eternal survival that counts, not the temporary survival. Sure, we need to survive in the temporary plane of existence because that's how we're designed. But everyone knows that's not going to last. And so I'm not here to help you be fearful of the temporariness of that. But when you begin to understand the deeper nature of your existence in the spiritual plane of reality, just know that patience and faith will go a long way to helping you understand the process that begins during those fiery trials in the dark night of the soul.